But if you don't convince a farmer that he can make money, this is not going to happen. And that's where we need to put a lot more effort. Thank you. So my name is Pete Vegas. I'm originally from Louisiana, moved throughout the country, out of the country a couple of times. I now live here in Boulder, Colorado. I've been here for about 10 years. So I've been in farming, agricultural projects, food for 50 years. I started as a farmer. I kind of worked my way up the food chain, worked for a very large rice milling company for many years, traveled the world looking at rice, eventually started my own company. My original concept was to cook and freeze organic brown rice so that it can be a high quality product, can be made in 3 minutes instead of an hour, and hopefully move more people to eating what I consider a very healthy product. So the company's grown. We're in most natural food stores. In fact, we're one of the top selling items in natural food stores. We're in conventional stores. And basically, this is a full-time job for me. I hope to retire in a couple of years. I'm a big advocate of regenerative ag. That's where I hope to spend the rest of my career, and hopefully what money comes out of this. So you've all are very aware of what our reliance on petroleum has done to the environment. If you look at any of the books like Drawdown, you'll be surprised to see that, and if you add it all up, food and agriculture is a huge contributor to greenhouse gases. So Peter completely covered animals, so I don't need to go there. I'm going to talk about cropland. The one thing I will say is he thinks it's hard to talk a cattle, grazer into changing. You should try a cropland farmer. That's much more challenging. The grazing actually works. It makes money pretty quickly. It's an easy transition. It's not the same with cropland. But the biggest opportunity to move carbon, especially in industrialized nations, is with cropland, because that soil has been tilled. It's given up a tremendous amount of carbon, and it can take back in a tremendous amount of carbon. Sorry, I'm slow at this. Okay, so, but there are also huge benefits to regenerative ag, and you obviously understand climate change. Diminishing water supplies, you know about the droughts throughout the world, you know about the droughts in western United States, the Colorado River's drying up. This is a shot that I took off a New York Times article only 2 or 3 weeks ago. 40% of our underground water aquifers are at all-time lows. It took thousands of years to build that water up. We will never put that water back. This is another slide which shows the red are decreasing aquifers, the blue are inclining. So we are totally trashing this natural resource. So back to my original slide, we're also ruining soil health, which to some extent Peter described that. But we're mining the living hell out of our soils. The organic matter is disappearing. We're also killing the natural microbiome below the soil. There's been a lot of learning in the last 5 years about what goes on below the soil. That's probably the most important thing that's come out of this. People are learning how important bacteria, worms, insect, different types of fungi, mycorrhizal fungi in particular. When you're putting chemicals and fertilizer on this soil, when you're plowing it, you're destroying that. So the result of that is this is the usage of nitrogen in our country today. Now, I'm sure if you don't know, nitrogen is urea. It's made from natural gas, which of course is a huge greenhouse gas. Now, I happen to have an investment in a modern greenhouse, so I can tell you, you can grow a plant in water with nutrients. And that's basically what we're starting to do. We have moved so much organic matter out of our soils that we're just pouring fertilizer on it. Now, in a greenhouse, the plant will take up 100% of the water and the nutrient. When you're pouring it on a poor soil, most of it's going down the drain into our rivers, streams, eventually in the ocean. So the last one is over-fertilizer and chemical use. I think I explained that, but if any of you live out in nature or in the country, you know what's going on. I've been around oceans my whole life. I've watched the reefs disappear. Where I'm from in Louisiana, the tree line around all the farms are dead from planes dropping chemicals on it. I won't eat the fish in the lake that I was raised on anymore. So I'm going to back up and give you a quick Regenerative Ag 101. Many of you know enough where this may not be of interest to you, but if you go outside and look around, all the organic plant matter that you see, trees, shrubs, grass, is 50% carbon, okay? So millions of years of photosynthesis, plants pulling carbon out of the air, replacing that with oxygen, basically has developed the environment that allows us to live today. Now, you all know that we've disrupted that natural balance by pulling fossil fuels out of the ground where they were once stored. A lot of people don't realize how much of our problem is caused by modern farming techniques. It's said that 25% of the carbon in the air came from our soils. Now, I don't know how they calculated that, but what I can tell you is I've personally seen a lot of land that at one time carried 8% organic matter, that now is down to 1.5%. I know for sure that soil can take that back and even more. So regenerative ag is about trying to restore the health of the soil. It's about trying to bring carbon out of the air back into the soil. It's about growing something on the soil at all times, cover crops. 95% of the land in this country today sits idle in the winter. And if you don't know, there are plenty of things that grow in the winter. Even wheat, barley, products like that grow in the winter. So it's about growing these crops and then not tilling it and basically releasing what you just gave up. It's when you till the soil, turn it over, and expose organic matter to the atmosphere, that's when you lose it. It's about not using so many chemicals and fertilizers that you're destroying the microbiome below the soil. So this is a photo I like to show that really explains what this is going on. This is a friend of mine in Nevada. So he grew triticale, which is a winter crop in the winter. Sometime before planting, he terminated it with a rotor tiller, which laid it out flat, like you see, like a tatami straw mattress, basically. He used a no-till drill, and he seeded corn into that. Now, there are people who'll say that's pretty simple. This should be a multi-species crop, and I can't argue with that, but this was his first year. So what you see here is, first of all, that triticale is basically fertilizer for the microbiome below the soil, which needs something to eat to survive, for the plant into the future. It's so thick, weeds will not grow through that, okay? It's preventing water runoff. When you've got a coverage like that, the shade is taking 20 to 40% off the temperature of that soil in the summer. So the water's not evaporating. You're not killing the microbiome. So this is just a perfect description of what regenerative ag is. It's less fertilizers, less chemical, less water, a more nutritious end product. The food that we eat today, does not have the nutrition that it used to have. So these are some photos just to give you a better idea of what I'm talking about. This is a mix of grasses. That's like triticale, rye, oats. But look at how thick that is. Look at how much biomass is returning to that soil when that's not going to be harvested or plowed under. And what you can see here is there's an equal amount of that under the ground, which is even more important because the roots, the exudates that are coming off the roots that the microbiome is feeding on is far more important than what's above the ground. This is another, that first one was in California. This is also in California. This is a totally different type of cover crop. It's a mix of triticale, legumes, some grasses. If you can see way in the background, there's a herd of sheep. He's terminating that with the sheep. Using these same techniques that Peter talked about, those sheep will be in there for an hour. They will mow it down, poop it back, and be gone. And this actually, the next year, was a crop of rice. He planted rice on that same field. So one of the things that I'm involved in is I'm funding research projects at the University State Research Facility in Louisiana at LSU. This is our first cotton crop that was planted behind a cover crop, and quite frankly, it looks really good. Our soybean crop was a failure. That just tells you we're still learning. My goal there is to try to develop a simple 3-part process that farmers can follow. What do you do in year 1? What do you do in year 2? So that they don't lose money when they go through this transition. The end result is they're never probably going to get the same yields they do with pouring a bunch of nitrogen on it, but they'll have their savings in inputs will more than cover that. So people that have been successful at this are making more money. And that's what has to happen with farmers, is to convince them that they can make more money. So I'm going to back up a minute. So, there are a lot of other people working in this. I don't know if you're familiar with the Carbon Underground. I was just at one of their farms recently. They have this device called a flux tower, where they're actually measuring the amount of nitrogen going into the soil and coming out of the soil. They work with Chico State University. They're actually bringing a lot of science to this, which is new. There are very few people working on the science. They're measuring what's happening with the microbiome below the soil. There are a handful of farmers who've done this at scale and proven that out. You're gonna hear from one of them right behind me. You've seen a lot of the movies that have come out, like Kiss the Ground or Carbon Cowboys. Those are great for educating us. They're great for educating the public. But I can tell you, Kiss the Ground has no effect on farmers. I've made them watch it, and they are upset after they watch that film. So these were not designed for farmers, A lot of the videos that Gabe Brown puts out, they're a lot more effective. So now I'm going to get into rice. Now, rice is the crop that feeds more people than anyone in the world. And when it comes to the climate, it's probably the worst crop out there. It's the most challenging because it's grown underwater. And it's really hard to grow anything regeneratively when you're in a flooded field. And worse than that, and I don't know how much you hear about this yet, but rice, because the decomposition of whatever was on that field is occurring below water in anaerobic conditions, it's releasing methane. So rice is contributing to global warming, at a pretty high pace. So, and the only way we're going to solve the problem with rice is to somehow start growing it dry. Now, you're seeing a movement in underdeveloped countries with what they call SRI rice, where they're growing, they're reseeding it, they're transplanting it, they're putting them pretty far apart, like, a foot apart. They're using compost, they're using cover crops, and they're getting fantastic results in terms of yields. They're not having to use fertilizers. The problem with that is these are underdeveloped countries, and they can afford to go out and, with a hoe and clean the weeds out because they're small plots. A typical farmer in Louisiana has got, or Arkansas or California is farming 5,000 acres. They're not going to do that. This is a farmer, I don't know if I mentioned before, but we buy our organic rice from Northern California, Arkansas, Thailand, and Argentina. So this is my farmer in Argentina, and this is a crop of organic rice. And this is the closest I've seen to regenerative rice. It's not perfect, and it can't work in this country because in Argentina, there's a lot of land and it's cheap. So the way these guys farm is a farmer will have 5,000 acres. It'll rain in the winter. He'll collect that water in a pond. That pond is enough to flood 1,000 acres. So he'll have 1,000 acres of organic rice. The next year it goes back to cattle and grassland. He doesn't come back for 3 or 4 years. But during the 3 or 4 years, he's contributing to, an improvement in his soils and improvement in carbon levels. This is probably the nicest field of organic rice I've ever seen. No fertilizers were used. There are no weeds in it. There was no, herbicides used, and the field yields were as high as anything I've ever seen. So 5 years ago, you talk to a rice farmer in the United States, they would tell you rice is an aquatic plant. It has to grow in water. That is not right. Rice is a grass. The problem is, if you put it out in grasslands, it's going to be overwhelmed with a lot of other grass. It happens to be a grass that grows in water and nothing else does. Water is weed control, okay? So what's happened in the South, and when I say the South, I mean Arkansas in particular and northern Louisiana, they've started to move to dryland rice. And initially they did it years ago because Gerber's was looking for rice for their baby food that didn't have arsenic. And if you don't put it in a flooded field, it takes up less arsenic. And what they learned is they actually make more money because they're not pumping the water. They don't have to pull levees. It's a lot less labor intense. And so I would say today, in a short period of time, probably a third of the acres in the South has moved to what I would call dry land or row crop farming of rice. They're rotating it with soybeans and corn. So I took a group of farmers from California who think rice is an aquatic plant to show them what's going on. And I brought them out to several fields where they could see beautiful crops of rice grown row crop. And so the lights came on one of these guys. And he went back to California. He happens to be a tomato farmer. And they grow tomato farms over tape irrigation. The tape is maybe 12 inches underground. It's like drip irrigation. To grow that's what's used to grow most vegetables. They might use, say, 1.5 acre of water. Rice is using 5 to 10 acre feet of water. He did this before the rains hit, thinking this might be the only way to ever grow rice in California again. Unfortunately, the rains hit, but that doesn't matter. This was his field when it was green. This is his field ready to harvest. I mean, it's been a fantastic success story. I don't know of another place in the world that's done this, and it's really the future of California because they're going to run out of water. It's just a matter of time, and if they're going to continue to grow rice in California, this is what is going to happen. So unfortunately, this needs to happen on a much bigger scale. There's not enough attention to farmers. How can a guy like Bill Gates write a book on climate control and own 200,000 acres in the United States and not be following any of these practices? And he's not, because I've been on his 2 biggest farms. How can you graduate from a land-grant university in this country that focuses on agriculture with a degree in agronomy and not know what I'm talking about? There's no coursework whatsoever. Chico State's the only university I know that's even making an attempt to teach this sort of stuff. And then you go to universities like LSU, which is a land-grant university that has 17 research plots throughout the state. And other than the little one that I'm paying them to do, they're not doing it on any of them. None of these universities are doing this. So farmers learn from each other, but not that often, as you just saw. They learn from their father. They learn when they graduate from school, and they learn going to these research facilities. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done. This is a small it was started by a grower. It's still a grower-led revolution. Big money will never get behind it. Big money in ag is just like big money in oil. There's no money to be made if they can't sell chemicals and fertilizer. So there's just a lot more work to be done here. Less water, less arable land, growing population, underdeveloped countries that want to eat more protein. It's so clear to see where this is going. It's frightening, and most people can't own up to that. They don't even want to hear about it. So there are people in this room that can do a lot to help. I'm not a politician. There are people here that know how to sway politicians. There are people here that know how to make films, who know how to make a story to the public. But what I'm telling you is the missing piece are the farmers. The consumer, the population can all understand what this is about. But if you don't convince a farmer that he can make money, this is not going to happen. And that's where we need to put a lot more effort. Thank you.